And due to limitations of the platform, attendees that are accessing the meeting via the telephone number at the bottom of the agenda will only be able to listen to the proceedings and will not be able to contribute. Please access the video conference via the link on the agenda, even if you do not have a webcam to participate. So attending tonight is the full board, all 5 members, as well as staff, Rebecca and Jeff. And tonight we do not have anybody from engineering joining us tonight. So it's a pretty light agenda. So that being said, I'll open it up to open forum. Anything from the staff for open forum?
Not from me, nope.
I just want to say, though, I think Bob had a difficult article yesterday, and I want to say I think he did a very good job with it. So it's got a history to it, and I think he did a very good job representing the article. So
Agreed.
Thank you. All right, anything from the board? Mike?
Along those lines, I think we should recognize Jeffrey Morissette and Rebecca Cheney for the work that they did yesterday at town meeting. This town is very lucky to have people who are dedicated and work so hard on their behalf. So thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
kind
Yeah,
work.
thanks, guys.
I'll second that. And say
Very
the same thing for Jeff. He had a very difficult presentation in terms of a couple of the articles and stood up there and answered all the questions very effectively and efficiently
And professionally.
and professionally. Yes.
Thank you
Yes,
very
thank
much.
you, guys. Much appreciated. Let's see. Anything from anybody else on the board?
Nope.
Oh, we did have some progress made yesterday on some of our bylaw amendments, which is great. So that's all good. All right. So our first meeting tonight, our first item tonight, again, what's that?
Just one other thing, Darren. We really can't do it tonight, but we should think about it as a board if we wanted to have any follow-on discussion, especially regarding the items that did not pass yesterday. We might want to think about putting that on the agenda at a future meeting.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think that was the plan for the massage establishment item as well, right? So that was going to be looked at down the road. So that's a good call. Anything, Rebecca, from the audience for open forum?
Nope.
All right, great. All right. That being said, we'll move to our first item, which is under general business, PB 1612, regarding Juniper Hill and a request to authorize release from their tri-party agreement. This is a private way, and apparently the road has been completed per engineering's approval. Per the memo we got from Paul Starrett, there are a couple of small items to be done on the road, which the owner has agreed to do, according to Paul in engineering. So I'll hand it over to staff on this one.
Sure, I think you covered most of the points. The developer seeking release from the tri-party agreement, and this is my first one that I've done since I've been here, so maybe there's people who don't know what these are, but it's an agreement between the town and the bank and the developer. So the bank holds the funds, and then the planning board, that document that we created for you to sign, grants the bank permission to release the funds. So we are prepared to have you sign the form and release all the funds back.
Great. And this is it's a private way, so this doesn't require holding on to the surety for an extended period. So just as some clarification. So
Yep,
anything from the board? All right. Anything from the audience on this one, Rebecca?
I don't believe so. No.
Pretty straightforward one. There was one comment Paul had about holding on to the last certificate of occupancy until the as-built, the modified as-built is handed in.
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
So according to the developer, that's not going to take more than a week or so. And they're not they have, where you have 2 COs left and they're not looking for it to have those signed off on until I think the beginning of November. So they have a few weeks to get things done. So I think we have plenty of time to get everything wrapped up.
Great.
And I do, that form that you found in your packet, I will need to have everyone come in and sign at some point in the next, I don't know, maybe this week if you have time. I'll leave them at the counter where the things usually are and you can just drop by and sign.
Great. I'll make it a point. Anything else from the board? Is there a motion to authorize the release from the tri-party agreement for Juniper Hill?
Second,
So moved.
All right. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Bob?
aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Kate?
Aye.
Dylan?
Aye.
I say aye. All right. We'll see you at the town hall for some signatures. The next item is item B under general business, and that's regarding a request for administrative review and approval of a change in use from professional office to retail space of, or from professional office to retail sales of motor vehicles. And that's for 323 Littleton Road, and that has been postponed to a future meeting. And was that by request of the applicant?
No, we had some questions about parking that we were up against the clock getting the packet prepared and we didn't have the answers we needed. So we wanted the building commissioner to review the information again. We got some new information. We were waiting on some new information. So I would say in the next meeting or the meeting after that, depending on what the building commissioner determines. So.
Great. All right, so that brings us then to correspondence reports and updates. And we have a topic for discussion tonight regarding interpretation and application of the zoning bylaw sections 7.1 open space residential development and 7.2 flexible development. And these really came about as some recent discussions we've had in meetings over the past few months. I know that Dylan had submitted some questions for clarification recently, and Kate, I think, had a suggestion to have a discussion here this evening about this kind of topic. So everybody can kind of get on the same page in terms of the section 7.1, 7.2. We definitely did receive some comments back from town council, and I would just, before we do the discussion, it is just a discussion. This is not a public hearing. And I would ask everybody to not reference any ongoing public hearings that are going on or projects in town right now that this may be applicable to. So this is certainly just a discussion about these bylaws and, clarification and then potential remedies for long-term remedies for these as well. So I'll hand it over to Jeff and Rebecca, staff on this one, for a little more background if you want to add some stuff.
Do you want to talk about background, Jeff, or do you want to talk about the sort of the plan for the evening? Or neither?
I felt like I've done a lot of talking of late, but I do have a couple of suggestions. So first, the opinion from town council, I think, says very simply, there's a few portions of the bylaw that are actually clear.
Right.
And then the rest is full of contradictions, is unclear. And I think she used some strong words to indicate the need for considering amendments, our favorite thing, amending the zoning bylaw. So I maybe start by focusing on parts that council is suggesting might be straightforward, see if you can all reach agreement on that. And then where it's not, see how you might want to address that. It sounds where it contradicts or is unclear, that this board would have opportunity to use their discretion and how best to interpret it.
Right.
And help you
Yeah, I
with
was
some
thinking,
suggestions for long term, if you like.
yeah, I was thinking kind of short term is like what you said, we'll talk about the clarification we received from council. And then long term, really the goal for, I think, tonight is to give staff some direction in terms of how we want to further define this and clarify it going further down the road. So I'll open it up to the board for discussion about the comments we received, obviously, from some town council. As Jeff said, the one was pretty clear. The other one really was clear in the fact that it showed we're very ambiguous. So Dylan or Kate, do you guys want to start the discussion on this one?
Flip a coin.
What's that?
I'm looking at Dylan saying, who, you want to flip a coin, who goes first, or?
Well, I think if we look at the first comments from town council is about
Yeah,
the definition of common land. So
yeah.
let's see, pretty straightforward.
Yeah, there is, reading this reminded me a bit of the gross floor area issue that we had and resolved at town meeting yesterday, and that different terms are used kind of interchangeably instead of consistently. So my interpretation of all of this is that anything that's not built upon, or there will be a subsection of the parcel that's considered common land that's to be used by the residents and or the town. And in the common land, there are different subsets of types of common land. The one is the recreational component that is geared towards active recreation. And that's the one where town council said at a minimum they need 1 acre of land suitable, flat, dry land suitable for recreation. And that part of the quote common land can have structures on it. And we have had that in previous open space plans, as well as flexibles where gazebos or benches or whatever. So playgrounds, whatever. And then the component is considered open space, and the open space part of it, in my interpretation, is whatever's left of the common land, and the open space part is required to have a conservation restriction on, either a conservation restriction on it with the town, with the Conservation Commission being the grantee for the conservation restriction, or if both the Conservation Commission and the Planning Board are amenable, it can be actually deeded over to the Conservation Commission. And that is my interpretation of common land. And how, when I was reading through that, through this section of our town bylaw, zoning bylaws, the part that is still unclear is the part, oh, and I should probably also say that town council, thank for her opinion that, so for every up to 25 lots or housing units, there has to be 1 acre set aside for active recreation. And so if you have 26 or 28 houses, you have to have 2 acres. If you have 10 houses or 24 houses, you only need 1 acre of land set aside for recreation purposes. And the third component is the part that's the most contentious and the most confusing, and that has to do with 100 feet. Because it says, I think, what, 100, within 100 feet of each house lot. has to be open space. And I think the reason for that might be, and this is my interpretation, is that these house lots are geared towards residential A, which has a 40,000 square foot lot requirement. And by going to the open space residential development, they can get a minimum lot area of 20,000 square feet. And basically you're just shrinking the lot in half. So maybe the intent of this was that you can push the houses up front, but you want the equivalent of a 1 acre lot. So we're going to have the back 100 feet, quote, being open space, which would have the conservation restriction on it. Another interpretation could be that, did they mean open space, or did they mean it should just be common land? And so it's possible that some of that 100 feet behind a house could be the recreational component. So, and it's also confusing, as Dylan, I'll let Dylan talk to this more because he had pointed it out in his request to town council, that is there a requirement that every house has to have a 100-foot open space behind it? Because we have had several open space developments come before us where some of the house lots are actually right on the edge, and because of the shape of the land, there's no way to have the housing units, house lots, plus 100 feet of land behind them. And anyway, I'll leave it at that.
All right, thanks. I think, yeah, there's really, I don't know if you guys, if we want to talk about first the common land, the first definition that town council kind of specified, really clarified that the 10,000 square feet of dry land per dwelling unit, and then the 1 acre of flat suitable land for baseball type land for up to 25 lots. That one seems pretty straightforward, as Kate, as you said. It's the next one that gets into a lot more ambiguity. So Dylan, if you want to,
I had one comment on that one. I don't know if you want to take it now. I had one comment on that common land.
Yeah.
A minor comment, but there's a minor perturbation when you get down to real small development sizes. I don't think you could get down to 3 or 4, but if you did, you had 3 or 4 lots only, you would only have 30,000 square feet being contributed, but yet you're requiring 1 acre of the common land be level dry land. So
right.
it's
definitely some
minor, but we just
Yeah,
have
but
to probably be clear.
But you have to remember, they can only apply for developing under this section of the bylaw if the parcel is 10 acres or more.
Right. I was just going to say that you'd never have a 3. I don't think you'd ever have a 3 development go in.
Yeah, probably.
No, I don't think it would make any sense for the developer to propose that.
No.
Right.
Well, maybe if a lot of it was wet, you know,
Yeah.
it could.
I suppose that's true. Yeah, I suppose that's true.
But they still have to show the conventional yield though.
Right.
So.
Right.
Yeah, at that point, there's probably no value to doing an open space plan if you
Right.
could only have 3 houses on 10 acres anyway.
Right. Well, I think that's a good point. I mean, even though this is pretty straightforward here, I think if we long-term need to tighten this thing up, then maybe that could be addressed in this too. Does anybody have questions on this first part, this definition of common land? I mean, obviously there's questions about kind of to Kate's point, there's common land, there's dry land and so forth, but I think as far as the calculation itself goes, it seems pretty straightforward on this one.
I'd agree, but I think point out that the common land shall be no less of square feet of dry land. And then when they talk about the 1 acre shall be level, dry, and suitable for baseball. Well, I don't know, in the past, does that require them to build a recreational field or just have land that is suitable? Right, so it just needs to be flat, does it need to be cleared?
Yeah, and that's from my
Right.
experience, from what I've seen so far, is that there's not, you don't need to put a baseball field in, but you need to have a space that people can go out and picnic on or play a game or throw a frisbee or something like that.
Right, I mean, because I read that,
And
and if I'm representing a builder, you've got a flat acre there, but I'm not cutting trees down. It's suitable if somebody else wanted to do that, but I don't know that, does it require them to build it or make it recreational? I don't know.
So the other thing besides cutting trees, which can be difficult, is removing the boulders. So you can't have a lot of rock outcroppings, even if it's level land. So, yeah, I think there's a few things here we need to be very clear on if we're going to enforce this.
Right.
But that's a subjective thing. About
That's-
well, I
persons. Go ahead, Dylan.
as I considered the town council's comments, and I echo Kate's appreciation for town council weighing in with this letter, because I think it helped a lot. When I read that suitable for baseball, the thing that I'm thinking is it may not need to be like cleared to the extent that like a ball field would actually be like, void of any trees, but it probably shouldn't be like forested, right? Because you obviously couldn't throw a frisbee there or whatever. So if there's like lighter tree cover there and the ground is, mostly grass, light of underbrush or no underbrush, that's what I sort of take away from the spirit of that comment, suitable for baseball, is, maybe we don't make them cut every single tree down, but maybe we say, look, is it generally open? And if the community wanted to go and have a picnic or a community gathering or something, that'd be the logical place to go get some sun and have a little bit of room to let the kids run around,
Yep. So kind of dry, usable space, really.
I think that we need to think about amending it then, because again, if I'm representing a builder in here, there's a level place suitable for baseball, but it doesn't say I have to make it suitable for baseball, right?
Right.
Yeah, I don't know where the baseball example came in, but yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, and I think,
Yeah,
well, I was going to say, I think, we, in our packet, we have a bunch of examples about open space development and different ways to calculate that and promote it. And I like the example. There was one, I think that was an intern did it like in 2019. There's a draft of an open space development policy for Westford in the packet. And I like the way that defines it. It doesn't get down to 10,000 square feet per lot. It really gets into just a percentage of the land and the development. So I think that would make it a lot cleaner and a lot more easy to understand for everyone, applicant, builder, the board, everybody. So I'd like to move in that direction going down the road, but obviously right now we're not there yet. But that would be my own opinion on that.
I think what's in the packet is it's a template that has been offered by the state for towns to use to draft
Right.
an open space plan.
Yeah, and then there's, I think down further, there's a stab at a draft for Westford, just as an example. But I like just using that example. I like that language in there, but it's my own comment.
So Darren, if I can, I think you are correct. We did have one of our excellent interns work on that project. And so it did begin as model, template from the state, or as Rebecca mentioned, I don't know if that one came from Mass Audubon, but the point was we thought it made sense to take those formula-based ones and try to tweak it a little bit and then play test it on past subdivisions in town. So in other words, if you took the initial raw piece of dirt, and you applied that approach, what might you have ended up with as a result? Because in our opinion, if the number of dwelling units were substantially different from what you might have gotten in a conventional, if it was too low, wouldn't work probably for developers. If it was too high, then that wouldn't work for other folks. And so we thought there needed to be more effort to find a way to tweak it to get to a range that would be comfortable to maybe all sides.
Yep.
Where additional densities could be allowed for what, this board determines is right at that time in that location. So.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I mean, does anybody have more comment on this one? I mean, it seems
The
like
only
it's-
question, Darren,
yeah,
the only question, and it's not one that I think necessarily begs an answer, would be what I like about this, the first part of this is I think now we have a cleaner and clearer understanding, and obviously we can factor that into the early conversations with applicants who bring forward, plans in the future for open space developments. I do now, I'm sort of sitting there thinking, without naming any specifically, we have some of these in front of us now kind of questioning, how do we apply this or think about these conversations with applicants who are currently in the process where they've put some time and effort into, laying out a plan that may or may not, meet this. I think we have to, I just think we have to tread a little lightly there and sort of, be reasonable with the applicants who are currently in front of us, but at the same time, see what we can do to encourage them to, be as close to the bylaw as they can, with the plans that they're working through.
I think that makes sense. Yeah, I think that's well put, and could provide a nice kind of transition. I think, all right, so that is the point of clarity that council helped us out with here, which is great. Unambiguous and great. Now we get into kind of the muddier part of the definitions where the bylaw is written in a way that's contradictory. So it becomes a little more, I would say, more or less defined and more subjective, I guess. So, yeah, I mean, like the land within 100 feet of a building, I know that has come up a couple times. Kate, I like your interpretation of a couple of ways that could have been interpreted, I guess. But really, if you read it closely, and I think this is what council is saying, is it would require 100-foot basically halo around each house, which would be, more disruptive probably than conventional. So Mike, go ahead.
So I've been looking through the historical documents. I kind of got the thought that, as ambiguous it is, it may be that any land within 100 feet of any building lot. So it's not a building lot if it's maybe I don't know if you could even have it like a mixed use or something else in that development. It can't be used at, say, like a recreational building, right? So if it's land that's not a buildable lot, next to it, it has to be open space if it's part of that development. Does that make sense? So if for example, they were going to have a clubhouse, right? So that clubhouse couldn't be within 100 feet of a buildable lot. So any other land that's in that development that's not buildable within 100 feet of a buildable lot needs to be open space.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, would this even have contemplated at the time like a mixed use, development where maybe there was, I don't know, like a restaurant or retail or something on part of the development?
Something like that.
I think this is very poorly worded. I like the way you described it, Darren. It's a halo within 100 feet of the building lot, not the building.
Yeah.
But if you read this and were to apply it precisely, this would mean in an open space development, I can't take two adjacent lots and abut them. I actually have to put 100 feet of space between them if I were to apply this, which leads me to believe that this somehow has been transcribed over the years incorrectly, because I don't believe that was ever the intent of OSRD, to be taking building lots and spacing them apart. I think the intent had always been to push them together, push them up front, preserve more open space elsewhere in that development. And as worded here, you can't
It was
do
the
that.
1994 amendment. All land within 100 feet of any building lot shown on an open space residential development plan shall be designated as open space. So that's how I take it, right? So if it's not a buildable lot and it's other land and it's in that development, in that subdivision, then it must be open space. But
Yeah, and
Right.
it
Is this where-
doesn't say it has to be a halo. It's just any
No, but-
land.
It just says within 100 feet, though. It doesn't say behind the building or in front of. It just says, it has to be within 100 feet.
But council in their reply says that in the context, the phrase all land means all common land, right? So if we're thinking about amending this sort of these last two sentences of this to make them clearer, I think in the second sentence, I think council comes back and says the phrase not in the second sentence is completely out of place, right? It's completely contradictory to everything else in the entire section, in the entire 7116, right? Or sorry, 716. And if we insert the word common between all and land, I think it makes it a lot clearer, because it sort of is saying, and this was my question in the email I wrote asking for council's support here.
Right.
Building lots in these developments obviously should be next to one another, right? You cluster them to preserve open space in other areas. If it says all common land must be designated as open space, if it's, within 100 feet of a building lot, sort of means that should be that, open space for use by the community, not just an undesired parcel of like wetland or something, right?
Yeah, but you could have wetlands within 100 feet of a house lot.
That's part of the lot though, right? Not that you're treating as common land. Or are you saying common land? I know that they do this. I'm trying to get it. I'm trying to understand the original intention of what the people who wrote this were trying to get to.
I'm just thinking it's possible, based on the makeup of the parcel, that you could have a wetland directly behind some of the one or two of the house lots. And the common land is, the dry common land is somewhere else. And it
Right.
would all, and that would be equivalent to what we've had before us, where some of the house lots go abut up to a neighbor's parcel, and there's no way to get common land behind those house lots. So it would be equivalent to that.
I don't know if it was Darren or Michael said, but I liked it. I think by inserting, or maybe it was Dylan, when you put all common land within 100 feet, that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
Makes it a lot easier to parse.
But are we agreeing that there's no requirement that there must be common land behind every house? Because this doesn't say that there's a requirement that there is common land. It's just saying if there is common land behind a house, then the first 100 feet have to be open space.
Right. I guess the way I interpreted it was if you had the word common land in there, as it said, and then you were to design the development, you might cluster the homes forward. It's kind of like drawing international boundaries on a map, or drawing a cloud around the development. And you now draw this so that it's 100-foot round all of the buildable lots, and it applies to all the common land within that bubble. That all has to be designated as open space. And
But
we've
some
seen
of
that.
that, but some of that 100-foot bubble could be in a butter. Some of that 100-foot bubble could be wetlands.
And that's
not,
why I said, if you put the word common land in there, it's all of the common land that's within that space would be designated as the open space. if the abutters within there, they're not considered common land, so it wouldn't apply to them.
Yeah, I
Right.
think that makes sense.
And I think Mike mentioned this in one of his comments, but in subsection 1 of section 716, it says common land other than designated open space may contain accessory structures for educational, recreational, cultural, or community utility service for the development. So perhaps the intent was to provide 100-foot halo free of things that could go onto common land, but not onto open space, such as accessory structures or utility services, things like that. Perhaps the intention was not to have those things within 100 feet of a building lot.
Right. And so we've had examples of they're not open. I don't think they're OSRD, but we have some larger developments in town that have a common waste treatment plant on the property. And that's the kind of facility you would keep outside of that 100-foot
Exactly.
open space designation.
Yeah,
And
Yep.
see, so that makes sense.
right.
To me,
Yeah.
that's sensical.
Yeah, I think in combination, in excluding not in the prior sentence and then adding common, I think makes sense.
And if you were to combine that with, for example, that baseball field, and if you got into a situation where you were building some kind of a recreation shelter to hold equipment, let's say, and service that baseball field, that accessory structure has to be outside that 100-foot from any of the
Any-
building lots, not buildings, building.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Let me play devil's advocate, because we've had not necessarily open space, but like flexible, we've had this for flexible. Say there, oh no, we did with Spalding Hills. We had this where the portion that was for the recreation was within one of the circles in the roadway. So those are potentially less than 100 feet from a building, from building lots. In fact, they were, but it was kind of surrounded by the road structure. So would that be a special case where it complies with the intent, but not necessarily the absolute language? Or is it only you need the 100 feet
But in that,
to behind the house lots?
that doesn't say behind, but to me anyway. But Kate, in that case, that is open space, though. In the development that you just mentioned, that area in the center, I believe it is designated as open space. It's like that. It's a pocket
Right.
park or whatever they called it, right? So I think it meets the definition.
That was their recreational component, I believe.
But couldn't that be part of the open space?
But I think that still is technically open space.
Yeah,
It's common land, but not open space. Open space is the part where you can't do anything on it. It is the part where it has to have the conservation restriction on it. Whereas the
Okay.
recreational component is part of the common land that doesn't have to have a conservation restriction on it, so that they can put up structures and such for recreation. Is my
Didn't-
interpretation.
I think I'll be the devil's advocate to that one. I think we were talking about amending and thinking about that second sentence, including the word common. So all common land within 100 feet of any building lot shown on the OSRD shall be designated as open space.
Yep. And that's the open space is the part that requires the conservation restriction on it. And is not set aside for active recreation.
But I think the removal of not in developments over 25 in the second sentence would address that, because I'm looking at council's comments. The first clause of the second sentence would prohibit any portion of the required common land in a 25+ lot OSRD from being designated as open space, including the portion of the common land that is required to be suitable for recreational purposes. Read alone based on the bylaws definition of the term open space. Second sentence prevents any of the required common land from being designated for conservation, historic preservation, or outdoor recreation or education. I'm wondering, the question would be on a development up to 25.
So actually, if you look with the ellipses,
Yeah.
my interpretation is if you have more than 20, if you have 25 or fewer lots, your recreational component part, at least the way this is written, could also be treated as open space. If you have more than 25 lots, your recreational component, the 1 acre per 25 lots or a fraction thereof, may not be designated open space and therefore shall not have a conservation restriction on it. And then further down, it's a different thought, was my interpretation, was that all land within 100 feet would be shall be designated open space. So if you have 25 or fewer lots, their recreational component, because it can have a CR on it, could be within that initial 100 feet. But if you have 25 lots or more, their recreational component has to be outside of that 100-foot bubble, because it says it shall not be designated open space, which means it shall not have a CR on it, is my interpretation.
Jeff or Rebecca, anything to add on this particular section?
Only that I think you're doing the best with what you have.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I think you could take it any number of ways and you would come to different conclusions and they all would be equally valid.
Right. Yeah, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Kate, I'm just not seeing, I'm not
Okay.
seeing where the recreational space, the acre or 2 acres of recreational can't be considered open space. Like I'm not seeing where that's precluded.
I think,
The only thing I see is that that open space may not contain accessory structures or community utility services. So you can't use the community septic for the ball field, but there'd be nothing to preclude the ball field from abutting 3 or 4 of the building lots. From what I can see.
right, and that makes sense.
Well, I agree with the intent what you said, Dylan, but to be clear here, the developer could turn the septic field into a ball field. It just wouldn't count as that 1 acre of ball field-like space.
Right. And
Right.
it couldn't be within 100 feet of a building lot. Because of the community utility 100-foot thing.
Right, yeah.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, I think if we have to look at this, Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, the spirit or the letter of the law here, I think we all understand that the point of the open space development is to promote, kind of the cluster, the smaller footprint in that property, and then have some trade-offs there in terms of some amenities for the residents that live there too. So, I think we keep that in mind as we try to define this, which we have done, I think, in every case. So,
yep.
So we have that going for us. But I think we definitely have to work on the language on this in a future iteration. But I think we're all in agreement that it's, the intent of the open space development is that smaller footprint, and then, the promotion of some common usable land. So that's where we are.
So I take it back because in section 718, it says all common land has to have a CR on it. So the question is, what's the distinction between open space and the part that has to be suitable for baseball or similar recreational purposes?
Kate, did you say all common land has to have a CR?
Yep, in 718. It says the developer shall
Baseball field.
the deeds.
Sorry.
It says that the developer shall, and the paragraph 1 under that, the developer shall grant a conservation restriction to the town of Westford over such land, and they're referring to common land. Said common land.
So I'm wondering, Kate, if
That would have to be,
I'm wondering if there's been some accidental interchange again between the common land and open space. I thought you folks were
Yeah.
on something where
I think you're right.
obviously you want the lots to be near each other. The whole point was to cluster them. I'm kind of listening to what you folks have been saying. If you're looking at the room between a lot and say the perimeter of the subject property where it would be up against other abutters, maybe there's an intent that that should be open space and not have active recreation where it would have like the noise and such in proximity to the abutters. But I don't think anything says there has to be 100-foot separation between the lot and the perimeter. I
No.
think it makes sense that the common land obviously needs to be called out in the association and in the deeds. I don't think the intention, like you said, Kate, was to have a CR on the common land where there could be facilities like wastewater package treatment plant or something, or stormwater. I'm wondering if there's more mix-ups here than we were first thinking.
we also have to be careful with the CR for the ball field like space if it isn't pre-cleared, because you might, through a CR, prohibit the future clearing of that land.
Yeah, I think we have some answers. I think we have some more questions. But I think we're better off than when we started.
Yeah, I think so.
Agree.
I think,
So somebody tells me how they're interpreting this, so I want to make sure that we're all using the same language and understanding it the same. So somebody has has at least 10 acres and they come before us. So what are the requirements for common land?
I think you folks
Well-
agree that
Yeah, it's spelled out.
10,000 square foot for every lot
yeah,
is a starter.
Yep.
And that
Yep.
even if it's 25 or fewer, there still has to be an acre of relatively flat land suitable for recreational purposes. And of course, as Mike chimed in, suitable just might mean it could be used for, and they don't have to actually go, to the end and actually to maybe install improvements. It just has to be ready for it. And then I think maybe open space is really a subset. Maybe the common land is everything except the building lots, and the open space is a subset, special subset of the common land. And the intention was put a CR on the open space. And to the degree that you can, between the building lots and the surrounding properties, or within 100 feet of the building lots, because presumably, I think they would have been within 100 feet of the surrounding properties, you'd want that to be open space to provide as much of a, you want it to be passive and not active. So you're making all noise to, you know, annoy the abutters maybe. I don't know. Then everything that's in common, your association, everything has to get written up and whatever restrictions, but I don't think a CR proper can go where there's maybe active utilities and such. I don't know.
I think I mostly agree with Jeff. I think the only thing I may maybe slightly disagree, well, I don't know if it's even disagree. I don't think we can have that space designated for recreation, the baseball type land. I don't think it has to be developed as a ball field, right? But I also don't think that a developer can just point at a relatively flat piece of completely untouched, basically woods, and say that's the recreational space, because I think again, I'm taking from the, you know, suitable for baseball or other recreation to mean it's reasonably open. Like the sun hits the ground, you could go and lay out a blanket and have a picnic there, and it would, you know, it would be fine. It doesn't mean it has to be devoid of trees, but I think there has to be some, you know, usability to that space other than hiking.
Yeah,
I agree. I think that's very reasonable.
yeah, I agree.
So the common land consists of the part that's open space, which we are saying has to have a conservation restriction on it. But some of the common land can be used for other purposes, is what
Yes.
I'm hearing, such
Right.
as water treatment. I don't know. I don't think it can be used for, like, if they want to put in a common wastewater treatment plant, because that goes outside of the our definition of common land, I believe. And is it do stormwater components?
Actually, Kate, when you say it goes outside our definition, why are you saying that? Is there a definition you're referring to? And I say that because in 7161,
Yeah.
it says that the common land could contain community utility service, and I would interpret that to mean it could contain a water treatment facility for that development.
Right.
Yeah,
Just
or
thinking-
underground
shed.
power lines. Yeah.
Right. The
Because
shed,
the definition in the definition section says common land. Any parcel or parcels of land set aside in an open space residential development designated and intended for the use, benefit, and enjoyment of the residents of the subdivision or the town of Westford.
right.
So I don't know, maybe that comes under the use, I don't know.
I think a subset of that then is the open space. So you've got 12 acres. You know, 5 acres of those are building lots. Or the remainder is common land. And a subset of that common land is open space, which has to have a conservation restriction.
Right, so you think of it like a homeowners association is gonna own the common land.
Right.
Where the wastewater treatment plant is, where the utilities are, and it's owned by the association, and then the other land, which is maybe owned but restricted, but based upon the CR.
Right.
Yeah, and Kate, I mean, even that phrasing, the use, benefit, and enjoyment, if you pull common utilities through part of the common land and the entire subdivision gets their power through those utilities, clearly the homeowners are benefiting from that, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
Right.
I just don't want to get in a situation where you could have your 10,000 feet per lot and more than 50% of it is taken up with utilities and such, and can't be used for the enjoyment of the people.
Well, I think if
Yep.
in that situation, you'd have to look at, they still have to meet the criteria for the open space. So, of that common land, if the majority of it's taken up for a wastewater treatment plant and there's not enough meat to meet that open space requirement, then I think they'd run into some trouble.
I agree.
The only open space requirement we have then is that 100 feet bubble around the cluster of houses.
So if you took
Yeah.
a 25 lot subdivision, and let's just for clarity say that you had 6 acres of common land, at least 1 acre would have to be flat, dry, usable ball field space. That would leave 5 acres. And that 5 acres, as I think you're pointing out, Kate, could be used up in a large part by wastewater treatment and other community accessory uses, greatly reducing the benefit of that common land as it is defined now.
Yep.
But I do see here, I guess to staff and all the members of the board, in the future, we do need to bring together the definitions of common land in 716 with the definition of common land in the definitions further back in the bylaw.
Well,
There's a slight deviation between the two.
Right?
well, if I can,
Yeah, Dylan.
and I know we haven't finished with 716, but the only other section I wanted to honestly get you guys feedback on what you think about this is 7114, which is findings of the board. And Kate, I think, as I read through that, well, the one that I really wanted to pick you guys' brains on was how do we determine number 2, right? That the OSRD will not have a detrimental impact to the neighborhood, right? But Kate, I would think in the scenario you were just painting there, we could certainly at that point sort of look at like number 3, is the OSRD designed with due consideration for health and safety? I mean, if you had a development so small that all of the 5 acres, other than the 1 acre of essentially open space that is also used for recreation, was completely consumed with the utilities required just to support this development, I think we would reach a finding that we would say no to that, because we would say, oh, that's not being designed with health, safety, and that may also have a detrimental impact to the surrounding neighborhood. But I kind of wanted to get
I like where you're going with that with number 4, which is that the OSRD must be superior to a conventional plan in preserving open space, which clearly that would not be.
Right.
So, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. I think sometimes we land on the OSRD as maybe always being better. And I do sometimes find myself in our meetings wondering, well, maybe there are times that a conventional development actually makes more sense here. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I think you're right, especially given topography and whatever the site looks like. I totally agree.
Yeah, and given and as well as what it does to cluster the homes, maybe unfairly next to one abutter, while preserving a great expanse of open space closer to another abutter who would have minimal, if any, impact from the development. So that would certainly, in terms of the detrimental impact on the neighborhood, I think should be balanced. It shouldn't be unfairly placed on one abutter over another, or on a cluster of abutters versus a different cluster.
Right.
Well, and I wonder, what neighborhood? Is it the new neighborhood we're creating or the neighborhood that it's affecting?
I'm thinking about the neighborhood it's affecting.
It's already there. Yes, I mean, so
Yeah,
Jeff
good
and
question.
Rebecca, so as far as kind of direction to staff for, long-term clarification here, town council offers up maybe going back and seeing what what the original intent was, but that, I'm not sure if we can actually find documentation to that. is the board's pleasure to have staff look at similar open space, maybe some open space policies that our town council has worked on, and have some examples there as a way to further define and better define our plan? And then, yeah, I mean,
I'm in favor of that, Darren. And I mean, I think, you know, if we can't find something where, and the, you know, council's letter sort of says, you know, we should go back and see if we can, you know, understand original intent, but you know, lacking that, it
Right.
seems like they're giving us some guidance to say, you know, maybe remove that not and add, you know, common as a clarifier between all and land. Sorry, common, yeah. And that would help. I'm not sure it's a perfect section, but it's better.
We could get rid of it altogether, right? And put what we think is appropriate in there. I mean, if it's too convoluted and confusing to everybody else, what are we actually trying to do?
right. So if we're going to make an amendment to it, I think we should really make sure it's clarified.
Yeah.
Well, do we even want to just make it, I suppose it's the quick and dirty is just to make amendments, or at some point we might want to consider, do we want to merge the open space section of the bylaws with the flexible development section of the bylaws?
Again, back to, I think it was Dylan's point, I'm sure town council has model language that we can
Right.
review and see how much it deviates from what we have. And if the intent is the same, you know, model it after their language.
Yeah, but ultimately, we want it to be better defined for the landowner, the developer, the board, and all those involved. So butters, everything. So I guess we'll leave it to Jeff and Rebecca to kind of figure out, you know, what do you think is a reasonable kind of next step as far as what your thoughts are, and happy to have further discussion about it. Just, you know, like I said, I think it's going to be hard to discern that original intent going back in history,
Agreed.
but more so what is you know, what are some examples of some solid guidelines that are out there now? There obviously are some already in our packet. And even that draft that was done last year, even building upon that for maybe some new language.
That was a lot of different things. So I heard, and Rebecca did a lot of research already, trying to pull together past bylaws. She wasn't able to finish, and we dare not go near town clerk's office right now. But we can continue to do a little more research to find the different versions, and if there's any other supporting information for that. That will take a little time, and I'm not sure that we're gonna get to the end and find out exactly what was the absolute true intent. I don't know if we're gonna be able to do that, but we're happy to try if you want to have benefit of whatever there is to be had. And then the next version up could be, it sounded like there was somewhat consensus about maybe just clarifying what you have in the here and now and making some minimal fixes to at least not have some sections completely contradict themselves, and to add a little more clarifying thoughts. That might be a lighter lift in terms of an amendment. And then I heard, you know, we could just scrap it and start with either that example one, or find other OSRDs out there, or look to combine elements of the flex and the open space. If you're going to do that, at that point, I'd say the senior residential multifamily overlay district, because that led to another one of the topics that we won't discuss tonight, with some friction between boards, because another applicant said that section of our bylaw was too unwieldy and not practical. So there's 3 sections of our bylaw that relate to development and potentially higher density development or open space development. Some of them have overlapping interests. those would be a longer term project. So, and that's great, but that could be years by the time you go through, do that public outreach and get it ready for town meeting. And then you still have the short-term fixes. So we're happy to do research. We're happy to see about some short-term fixes, if you would like that, based on what we've kind of heard tonight. And then we can certainly provide examples from what other towns have done or other model language. But we're gonna need some direction from you and priorities.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine to Mike's point of if we want to address the entire open space part of the bylaw altogether, I'm fine with that, but I do think that could take a long time. And I do think unless something turns up with original intent, taking council suggestion with not and adding common at least makes that one section not in direct conflict with itself. And so that might be something we could even get through town meeting, in the regular town meeting in the spring. At least we have a bylaw that we're operating under that's not inherently sort of twisted in on itself while we work on the larger goal of overhauling the whole thing.
Okay. Kate?
It's one guy's opinion, that's all.
No, that's
No,
good.
I agree in the short term. Just get rid of the ambiguities parts and also go through it like there are some other technical editing things like under the section 719 special regulations, numbering sections got changed when the bylaw got modernized from the original version, but the text within the section it mentions a paragraph E, which is from the original version of this. So things like that, and like homes association instead of homeowners association, things like that can also be corrected at the same time. And maybe in section 718 legal requirements to determine should all common land have a CR on it, or only the portion of the common land that is just open space. So I'm okay with that as well, because that would be something I think is relatively easy to get done by our annual town meeting. Jeff and Rebecca. But I just want to make sure. So what I'm hearing we're all agreeing on is it's 10,000 square feet of dry land per house lot or unit. So a house lot could potentially have more than one housing unit on it. So it's per unit, not necessarily per lot, just in case. And that you have to have at least 1 acre of relatively flat dry land suitable for a ball field or such per 1 to 25 houses. And that 1 acre has to be reasonably open. Can't just be entirely wooded. It has to be usable for some type of recreational purposes. That common land can include utilities and stormwater components. That open space is a subset of the common land, and that is kind of at the discretion and discussion between the planning board and the developer as to if they have utility structures on it, what part of the common land is for that and what part has to have the CR on it. That if you designate 100-foot bubble around the houses any part of the common land that falls within that 100-foot bubble around houses has to be open space. It cannot be used for utilities or other types of structures, except I'm unclear as to whether or not it could be used for recreational structures such as a gazebo, or it could be used for a gazebo or something. And so I think that's it. It's just a clarification in 718 does all common land have to have a CR on it, or only the part that's open space, designated as open space?
All right. Thanks, Kate. Mike?
So back to your original question, it's my opinion that we've asked town council for clarification. We've got clarification that it's ambiguous, but I think we have the authority to interpret it in a way that involves the intent of the open space. You know, the spirit of the open space development. What I would not prefer to do is have staff and us go through open hearings, with public meetings to make minor corrections to go before town meeting. And we know what can and cannot happen at town meeting, just to go back in the future to further amend these bylaws. I think that if we are at a somewhat of a consensus of how this should be interpreted, and we're not leaving ourselves open for appeal more than we would anyway, I think effort and resources should be spent on revamping them instead of just the minor corrections. It's my opinion.
Okay.
But the
Bob?
question, are we all in agreement of being in how we as a board want to interpret it? Which is kind of what I was trying to say. Do we, what I just said before, are we all agreement in that's how we are going to interpret things?
I believe so. I think the only question, Kate, that I had as far as your summary was the 100-foot buffer. So
Yeah, you'd mentioned that there couldn't be any utilities in common land within 100 feet. I mean, I just don't think that that's feasible, you know? Again, my opinion, my interpretation of that is that if it's land within 100 feet, it's not a buildable lot. It's not an industrial lot or anything else besides an open space, but I don't know that it needs to have the conservation restriction on it.
no, and I can see not wanting to have, you know, the sewage treatment plant 20 feet from someone's house. So that, I think if that was, if I think we have the discretion to say, well, that doesn't really comply with the open space residential development. You know, we want to have a buffer between the houses and utilities. So I think, Kate, I think we're all in agreement that you don't want to have the sewage treatment plant next door very close to the houses. Again, getting to that 100-foot definition. Yeah.
So we don't have agreement is what I hear.
Yeah, so only within 100 feet of any building lot.
Must be designated open space is what it says.
Right, okay. Yeah, I mean, if everybody else is on agreement with that, that's, makes sense.
But
for me.
open, but
First off,
open,
it's all common land. I mean, it's very important because that's what
Yes.
we remove from consideration the roadway. That's what removes from consideration if you don't have 100 feet because of the proximity to the abutter. But if it's there
Sure.
and common land, yes, within 100 feet, it must be open space.
which means no utilities on it, is my interpretation.
But then it devil's advocate, right? Is if it's a private road, is that common land? So
No,
it's a public road?
Yes. What are you talking?
So,
Mike, you're talking about something totally different. You're talking of you.
Well, I think-
So you're talking about a butters, and we're talking about just the land within the development.
Oh, not though, Kate, right? So if
I think
if it
Kate
says
was
any
talking
land within, right, Bob, if any land within 100 feet of it has to be open space, and if it's a private road, it's common land.
No, I think we have to talk about the definition of what common land is, and I don't think common land would include the private road to service that development. And that typically, most of your utilities, your electric, your telephone, your town water would typically have their easements coming up that right of way. It's the other spaces around the other portions of the lots that is typically designated as common land. And the only thing that could really go there would be on-site utilities, such as if there is a common well and water treatment or a common wastewater treatment facility.
And those utility portions are common land, but not necessarily not open space. Is that how you're interpreting it, Bob?
Correct. And it would just mean that also in terms of how they would provide their service to their homes, you couldn't have the easements for those coming through the open space. So they would have to make their way out to the road, for example, and then it'd be a lot easier to do this at a drawing board.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just trying to visualize situations here with 100-foot open space where there could be no, utilities or shared service type stuff.
I guess what I'm thinking, Darren, is, we kind of have an example of a non-OSRD in town that does have a very large on-site wastewater treatment barn. And you would have to place that in such a way, it's probably going to eat up a lot or two in order to provide it so that it's got to be accessible. Those facilities typically have to have some kind of either a driveway or a paved gravel path to your roadway because they need to be serviced. And
Well, our thing says that all common land has to have at least 25-foot wide access to a road.
All right, so I think, Kate, I think you're okay on this definition because I was getting hung up on open space being that acre of usable land, but the open space is part of that initial definition, which is much larger than that acre. So that could be the area that surrounds these houses between, a stormwater management ditch or something like that. So I could see that.
But the recreational component, is that part of the open space part or just part of common land? So could that 1 acre or per 25 units be included within that 100-foot bubble? I'm thinking it could.
Well, I think that is in part of the open space. That 1 acre is part of the open space, not just common land.
Because it just says that 1 acre of common land has to be, it doesn't explicitly. Well, that's why we're getting rid of the word not,
Right.
so it shall be designated.
Right.
Exactly. And that's where,
Right.
and with all due respect, Mike, I don't understand how we could not take action when town council says, without more information, I cannot find a reasonable interpretation of section 716 that would harmonize the first clause of the second sentence with the first and third sentences. I appreciate your desire to look at this holistically, and certainly to spare town staff, having to get up and explain an even more complicated portion of the bylaw to town meeting. But I have a hard time thinking that we're going to spend the next 18 months trying to work on a better, and what may very well turn out to be a better version of the open space residential development section of the bylaw. But until then, we're just going to say, we have a 3-sentence section which the second sentence cannot possibly be read in a way that makes sense with the other two sentences and not put before town meeting that we need to remove the word not.
No, I understand. I don't disagree.
So let me ask you this. So staff, Jeff and Rebecca, if you were to kind of summarize our comments here, which kind of Kate just summarized, and ran that by council and just kind of get their opinion on, this is the way we're interpreting this. Does it make sense to bounce that off of them? And then from there, make these minor adjustments? I mean, I agree with Dylan, I agree with Mike. I'd love to be able to get this thing redone from the get-go, but I don't think that's a really quick fix. I'd love to be able to just fix the things that are blatantly wrong in the bylaw, or at least contradictory.
But I think that's a good idea. I think if Rebecca and I can kind of put together the list of the thoughts where I think there's general agreement, then maybe, I don't know if we need to run it by you folks again, or if you don't, or if you want chair and vice chair to look at it, not a quorum, that's fine. But I think it makes sense. This is what they think it is. How would you make the most economical changes to get rid of all the conflict?
Yeah, I mean, to Mike's earlier point too, I think we have some leeway to interpret this, and I just want to make sure that if we bounce it off council, that they're in agreement with how we're interpreting.
I think where it says in developments of 25 lots or more, said land is referring to the recreational component. This is my interpretation. I know, so I really don't see a conflict. I think we just have a lot of run-on sentences that have multiple thoughts in them. Common land shall be 10,000 square feet of dry land for each building lot or dwelling unit, period. For each 25 lots or units or fraction thereof, 1 acre of common land shall be level dry land suitable for baseball or other similar purposes, period. Developments of 25 lots or more, said land, which I must, because it comes after the part for the baseball, I interpret it that it's talking about the portion that's suitable for baseball or other similar recreational purposes must not be designated open space, except in an industrial
And that's
way.
Kate, that was my interpretation, and town council said I was wrong.
Right.
Member of the board interprets the phrase said land to mean the dry level recreational land and not the common land. In my opinion, this interpretation would be inconsistent with the plain language of the first sentence. That's exactly what precedes council saying, without more information, I can't harmonize. Like, I agree with you, Kate. That was what I thought. I thought they were talking about the dry level recreational land, but apparently that's not what council reads that second sentence to mean.
So I think we need to add phrases such as said level dry land must not be designated or something. I think we got to be very clear about using more clear language references than just said land.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
And we shouldn't have multiple thoughts in a single sentence either.
Well, wow. And then down below, the last sentence in that paragraph should be all common land, not all land within 100 feet of any building lot shown on an open space residential development plan shall be designated as open space. That makes it very clear. It's only the common land.
Right.
Yep. I'm happy with that interpretation of that.
Rebecca and Jeff, does that dive with your interpretation as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
I want
I
to
mean, I
get
think
this all. Go ahead.
I think one of the hard things is that this was cobbled together with many iterations overlapping. And so I think one sentence refers to something that was found in one iteration, and then another sentence was added that refers to another iteration. So it's hard to even, feel certain that they connect together in any way. So, I appreciate trying to connect them, but I don't know that they're actually connectable.
And based on, I appreciate you digging up the previous versions. They're really great. They're really helpful. I was looking at them. It looks as though they all basically have the same. I really haven't found any discrepancies, but I haven't gone word by word. It's just they changed paragraph numbering. But to be fair to town staff, based on my experience of trying to look at things that are computer age, it's going to be a waste of their time.
Right.
To be digging up a lot because boards did not keep detailed minutes. So you're not going to find out what was going on in their brains. So it's really up to us to do the current interpretation and how it should be modified.
Right. So as far as the takeaway now, you guys, Jeff and Rebecca, could you guys kind of summarize our thoughts tonight? Not on the entire subject, but just on these paragraphs we're talking about. And then if we can look at that and say, okay, we're all in agreement with that, or I think we're pretty much in agreement. I mean, Mike, what do you have?
So that if it's a good point, Kate. If we're going to go based upon our interpretation now, what do we want to see within 100 feet of any building lot? I mean, do we want to specifically say? I wonder if we should just, I don't know, toss that whole section out, but I guess that's not what we're talking about at this point. If we're just going to modify it for the short term. I don't know that I see the benefit of that.
The big thing, does open space include the recreational component?
Right. I mean, I think that we can, without that paragraph, we can, in our findings, determine what we want in those areas anyway.
Yeah. But
I don't know.
think
It seems like we're trying to put a Band-Aid on something that,
Yeah.
to me, doesn't make a heck of a lot of sense to begin with.
Yeah. I think the important thing here is that one of the attorneys has consistently stated we're interpreting incorrectly, and I think we are in agreement that it is possible to have. It's not requirement to have a 100-foot bubble around every house. That it's just an interpretation that we're only talking about the common land that is within the 100-foot bubble. And that it is possible to have houses with that go directly up about the abutters, and that's
Right.
okay. And I think for the applicants, that's the important thing, that we're okay with that interpretation.
Great point.
Yep, good point.
And I think it's also useful that the findings of the board, that they do have to satisfy those 6 requirements. What I thought was interesting is that the findings of the board, number 5, is the only place in this section of the open space bylaw that mentions a greater variety in prices and types of housing. And that's why I kind of had the tie-in with the flexible development, but that's a discussion for another day.
Yeah, I think so. Well, I think this has been a constructive conversation on open space, as ambiguous as this bylaw is. This is not a public hearing, but Rebecca, is anybody raising their hand out there?
Someone is indeed. And that is
Just
Mr.
remind, I would take a quick comment from the audience. I would remind people that this is a discussion and not related to any particular project. And just would let, you know, if someone wants to have a quick comment on what we've discussed here tonight, I'm open to that.
Okay, Mr. Williams?
Hello, Dan Williams, 7 Star Circle. I'm sure you're all familiar with me. I saw a couple of eyes roll. I apologize. I appreciate you guys taking the time to really delve into this bylaw. I know it's not the easiest thing for you guys to come to a decision on. I just had a couple questions. I saw the email that Rebecca sent over to Town Council on 10/13. I did notice that this decision that came back from the attorney was dated May 11th, 2018. Is that what they responded with? Or are you still waiting for a response from Town Council?
No, that was a typo on their part, and it was corrected, and the packet has been updated. So we didn't notice that until today, but that was,
Gotcha.
you know, that their response is current with this inquiry.
Okay,
So,
perfect.
okay, I noticed that there were 2 versions of the packet on the town, so the second version, is that has this corrected? Is that what you're saying?
The one with the longer extension has the updated memo with just the date change. The only difference is that there's,
Okay.
the date has been updated to, I think, October, maybe it was today, October 19th.
Okay,
Great, thanks for that clarification. I just wanted to point out, I do agree with, I think it was Dylan that said that dry suitable land for baseball or other similar recreation purposes would have to be somewhat developed, because otherwise you could pretty much make any acre on the property apply to that, because, you know, it could be hilly now, but they could level it out to make it suitable. So I would agree that it has to be a somewhat already developed, not necessarily have a playing field on it or whatever, but it would have to have some sense of levelness. And I just had a question. So for the third one, obviously that's the one I'm most, for third statement, that's the one I'm most concerned about. I'm curious to find out, I'm not sure how the planning board came about not having a, what I'll call a buffer. I know that's not technically the word that's used in the bylaw, but how is that, the way this is written now, how does that not necessarily apply the 100-foot open space around the outside of the development? I agree that a halo around each individual lot within development is kind of contrary to the bylaw's intent. But in the council's response, it said very clearly that the third sentence is unambiguous, in my opinion, and as written, requires all land within 100 feet of any building lot to be designated as open space. The second part of that is, what is actually a building lot? I didn't see that defined in the bylaw. It doesn't have any definition in the 10.2 definition section. You could definitely infer that a abutting property that has a building on it is a building lot, and therefore would require that 100-foot open space requirement. So in short, twofold, I guess it's, what is the definition of a building lot? And based on town council's response, I don't understand how you're coming up with the determination that that 100-foot open space requirement wouldn't apply between abutters and the development.
Yeah, I think I would interpret the building lot as within the development itself, so.
Can I respond to that, Darren? I think I can preside. If you read where it states that in 716, it's very clear that it's any building lot shown on that OSRD development plan. So it's only the building lots within the plan.
Yeah.
It's not,
Exactly.
does not apply to building lots that are abutters.
Yeah. Right.
But the
That's,
abutters are on the plan, technically, if you strictly wanted to go by the wording.
yeah, but that would, then anytime someone developed a piece of land, they'd be, you know, you'd have to be subject to every surrounding piece of property. Then I think it's, as Bob defined it, it's clearly written out in 716.
It's the OSRD building lots, not the surrounding building lots.
Okay, assuming that,
Subdivision.
okay, assuming that's the case, then how are you not requiring the 100-foot open space behind a lot on the development plan?
Well,
It doesn't-
again, if you read this, as we were discussing earlier, it should say it's really all common land. So you look at the common land that surrounds all of those OSRD building lots. Now, it happens that in some of the lots I think you're thinking about, there's very little gap between the OSRD building lot and the abutting building lot. But this open space would only apply to that gap area, that common land that would be existing between them.
Right, and I mean, from my side, Mr. Williams, I'm taking the interpretation that the council came back with that says read in context, the phrase all land means actually all common land. So in order for it to require 100 feet of open space, it would require that area that abuts a building lot has common land in it. And if it does, it must be open space. But it doesn't say you must provide common land in the form of open space within 100 feet of a building lot. It doesn't say that.
Right.
The bylaw is very non-specific about where the common land is actually placed. It can be placed anywhere on the plan.
Correct. Any further questions on that, Mr. Williams?
No, that'll do it. I don't necessarily agree, but obviously, that's the extent of my question.
Okay, thank you.
The only thing I would say, Darren, and to Mr. Williams is, I believe it was the last packet, I provided some materials to town staff that was based upon the work of Randall Arndt in this area of open space development. And there are some interesting conceptual layouts in that kind of capture how you are applying these concepts to cluster your homes to be developed in lots and to move them around the larger parcel.
Yeah.
I think in this case here, Mr. Williams, these lots have been clustered towards the front, towards the road, and they end up getting clustered one side or the other with respect to where the abutters are, in the interest of preserving large tracts of desired common land to be retained as open space.
Right.
And,
And it's also a funny shaped,
yeah, but I do
but
call
we
you,
can't talk about it. We can't talk about it.
but I do call you
It's
to
not-
read Randall Arndt's work to understand that concept of how
Yeah.
this land worked.
Right. All right, anything else from the board on open space?
No.
Staff?
Anybody else
I
in the
did
audience,
have
Rebecca?
something, I just wanted to get clarification from staff on 712. So some of the lots within the development can have frontage of only 50 feet, but in the aggregate, the average has to be 100 feet. So if you have one that only has 50-foot frontage, there has to be at least one that has more than 100-foot frontage, is my interpretation of that.
That's my understanding.
As long as by the time you get to the house, it's 100, the width of the parcel is 100 feet. So you could have like a trapezoid shaped lot.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything, Rebecca, from audience additional?
I don't think so. Let me just take a quick look here. Nope.
All right. All right, so staff, you have a short list of to-dos, right? Nothing, hopefully too heavy lifting.
I think Rebecca and I can cobble together something useful for your next packet.
That'd be great. Thank you. All right, so anybody else from the board, any further to add on this one? Sure, we'll have continued discussion. All right, so that being said, I'd like to move on to the next item on the agenda, which is a review of minutes from September of 21st.
I did, no, because if you're flexible development,
Oh,
there are parts of that that are also require interpretation.
right.
I thought
Yeah,
you
you
were
got-
just asking if we were done with open space.
All right,
So flexible development, it's the affordable component, which is section 7.2.8, 7.2.8. And this is where I disagree with
Hey,
applicant.
I don't mean to interrupt, Kate, but is it appropriate to bring this up? I mean, I don't know that I've spent enough time reading this to actually have a good discussion about it. I mean, I certainly think it's worth
Wasn't it
discussing.
included in, because that was.
yeah, it's on the
because
agenda.
It is?
It's
Oh,
on
my
the
bad.
agenda. And
Yeah.
I do believe that they included this part of the bylaw in the packet as well.
Okay, I see it.
Yeah,
So the affordable component and as a condition of the grant of any special permit for a flexible development, a minimum of 15% of the total number of dwelling units shall be restricted in perpetuity. And it gives a definition of to whom. And it says 5% to certain affordability, 5% to another affordability, 5% to a different affordability definition. And then the last sentence of that section says, when computing the number of affordable units, the number will be rounded to the next lower integer. And we have a conflict here because in most cases, if you say what's 15% of 18 or of 17, you're going to have a number that I can't think of right now, 2.7 or so. But if you round it down, which is what the applicants want you to do, you are now less than 15%. Whereas I say this, there is a requirement that it has to be 15%. So, Bob Schaffer, you've been, I think how past planning boards have interpreted it, but I believe that the intent is you really need to have the 15%, and so too bad.
Yeah, but isn't
guy.
that covered with? But isn't that covered, Kate? I mean, as a condition for the grant, a minimum of 15% of the total number of dwelling units shall be restricted to people or families who meet or qualify under the bylaws definition of low, moderate, or median income. So,
But the problem,
I mean,
but the problem
understanding
is
that-
the problem is that last sentence where it says we're computing the number of affordable units, the number will be rounded to the next lower integer. So by rounding it down, because you can't have 2/3 of a unit, you either have a unit or you don't. By
right, but it,
down,
yeah, but
all
I
of a
would just
sudden you
say,
don't have
but I would just
15. Go ahead.
but you have to have 15. But you have to have 15. The first sentence says a minimum of 15, right? So they can round down in their interpretation, but in maybe one of the categories, but then they're going to have to round up in a different category to get to 15, right?
I agree. I think it's the round down in one of the 5 different percentages, right? So persons, families that qualify in the median or moderate or low, that's where the rounding comes in.
Okay, because that's not how applicants will say it should be interpreted. They're just saying, okay, say you have to have, say 15% is 2.78, comes out to 2.78 houses. They're saying, okay, we round down, so we only have to have 2 affordable houses. We don't have to have 3 affordable houses. We only need to have 2.
See, again, you have more experience certainly, Kate, because I haven't been before one of these flexible
Yeah.
developments, but as I read, a minimum of 15% of the total. And I think, again, the rounding comes in the breaking up into the different categories.
Okay,
Yep.
I just bring that up because it's been a big bone of contention for flexibles. And I just want us as a board to be in agreement on how to interpret it for the next time it comes before us.
Yeah, I think it sounds like everybody agrees on a minimum of 15% is the minimum.
Yep.
Right?
So
Yeah, and if that means that 5.25%, you know, they did 5.25 in one category and 4.75 in another one because they rounded it down or whatever, like that's fine, but you got to get to 15
Or more.
Or more.
or
A
more.
minimum of 15.
Okay, all righty.
So, one little, because I'm being foolish here. So unless you have 20 or more units in a development, you're going to run into other rounding issues. Because that's, and first of all, item 3, the 5% shall be affordable to persons or families qualifying as median. So I think the intent here was the first one, items 1 and 2. Those are ones that would count potentially towards the subsidized housing inventory. And so that would mean that 10% would actually be considered affordable in terms of SHI. And so you wouldn't fall behind on your SHI with any one of these projects because 1/10 of the units would be able to count. But unless you have enough 20 or more units total, you are going to run into some issues in terms. You're going to have a much higher percentage. It's going to get a little more complicated, I think. But end of the day, it's your special permit. It says right up front, you need 15% minimum. They got to make you satisfied or you're not going to grant it. And it sounds like at least now this board has agreement, 15%, and they can mess with the numbers, but they got to get to the 15%. And so maybe you can haggle over which level of affordability or what have you, or maybe it ends up being 20%. I don't know, but you don't have to grant the permit if you don't think they're meeting the affordability requirements, is what it comes down to.
And I think, having been on the committee that originally reviewed this, I think we've learned a lot in terms of, in addition to these 3 areas, that 10% SHI, I think we've learned to be much more important. And I don't think that was in our vocabulary when we knew about 10%, but I don't think we were using the SHI definition. And I would certainly, if we did any kind of rewrite of this, like to make it very clear that I think a key criteria for the special permit is that we are making progress towards the 10% SHI at all times and not retreating backwards. I'm certainly willing to flex a little bit between the different areas of how we meet 5% here or there. But the 10% SHI for me is what's most important to this community. So I don't want to see round 2 of them down. I mean, if we take away one, you need to boost the other just a tad.
That the third one is the least important part,
Agreed. So I'm certainly willing to give a little bit, take a little bit away from the third so that we boost the first 2 and get the 10% SHI at all times. We never want to lose ground. We always want to keep going ahead with the 10%.
Right.
that's, Okay,
And as I've said before, I think, on this bylaw, on the senior residential, we had, I don't want to say necessarily rose-colored glasses. We certainly had visions that we now have learned are not always practical. But I think we're all in agreement that maintaining positive movement on the 10% and never losing ground is very important to the town of Westford.
I agree.
I would just like to say, though, that based on the developments over the last few years, the part of the community that is definitely losing ground is the middle. We are keeping there with the affordable, the people at the lower end of the income, and we're getting a lot of luxury homes. But we need to do something at some point with our bylaws so that we can retain the average person in town, that we don't become a town that has both ends and nothing in the middle.
That's a very good point in terms of not just incomes, but that kind of looks at the sizes and the number of bedrooms, et cetera. We ended up with a lot of homes at the high end, as you said, with basically in terms of the number of bedrooms, and also the monetary value of that home.
Well, I'm just
Yeah.
thinking of if you look at recent developments, like they are being advertised as luxury, like luxury 2 bedrooms with 2,500 square feet. That
Yep.
kind of thing. That's not for the average guy. That's for somebody who has a lot of discretionary money.
I would agree. But I think it's also the market kind of dictates that too. I mean, if it's more costly to buy land, and it probably needs at least to a more expensive home too. So,
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, that's why we, at some point, we need to think about our bylaws and how to make it so that they do encourage the middle ground as well. And the flexible is the component where we can do that.
Yeah, I see your point. Kate makes an excellent point here in terms of looking at the incentives. We've got to look at the equations here that would force the developer to be, that it would make sense for them to focus on the moderate in the middle. And so we have to look at those percentage bonuses that we hand out.
Yeah.
And we may want to adjust those so that, as Kate is pointing out, we get that favoritism going towards the middle. Because you got to drive it because of the financial numbers.
Because the
Right.
developer is only going to always want to build the biggest thing he can and get the most amount of money that he can. Because, he doesn't want to make a lot of money, but that isn't necessarily what's best for the town.
I guess then it would come down to definition of, okay, how do you define that middle? Is it a price range of the home compared to the state average? I don't know how you would define that, but I see your point.
Yeah, I mean, that's a long discussion, and anybody who has ideas on it is always welcome, but it's something that I've been trying to figure out for the last 5 to 10 years. So any help is appreciated.
Yeah, I mean, if anybody sees anything other communities have done in that respect, I'd be interested in looking at it. We all would, I'm sure, but definitely, like you said, a long discussion there.
But anyway, so for the flexible, that section, I think, is the part that has been the contentious part. And I just wanted to make sure that we as a board had some level of agreement on how to interpret it. So now I'm all set on this discussion.
All right, seems like everybody's in agreement with minimum 15%.
I agree with that.
I
And
guess the only thing I
that,
was gonna say, relative to what Kate said, I guess I'd look to Jeff and Rebecca if there's anything you could help me understand in terms of research out there. Even if we could if I could figure out how to describe what she's talking about in terms of the planning community. I'm not even sure how to put it into words accurately at this point, but would certainly like to go and see what might have been written out there that would help guide us.
Because that also goes into requirements where a development has to allow for greater variety in prices. How do you interpret that? You know?
And how do you incentivize it?
Yeah, it's subjective. Anything else on the flexible development? Nope. Thanks, Kate. All right.
Darren, my only comment, Darren, and it's literally a comment. I'm not trying to open it for much more, is there's no 7.2.14 findings of the board the way that there is in the OSRD. So if we ever do consider a rewrite of this section, I think it could be useful to have a similar section 7.2.14 that outlines, essentially what this board needs to find that the flexible development achieves in order to get the special permit. That would be my only comment.
Yeah, good comment.
Yeah, good point.
But
Agreed. I
Mike
think what
is-
happened there was, it looks like the purpose in Flex got expanded. And so I think in the case of OSRD, they split it out between the purpose and the findings. And we probably could pull some of the findings out of the purpose that's now documented for Flex in 7.2.1.
Mm-hmm. I'm thinking about your idea, and actually it's Jeff's idea. So let's give Jeff credit of the sort of that laminated card that he gave to the ZBA. And Bob, we chatted briefly at town meeting about that it might be, help us when we're seeing these to sort of have at our fingertips an easy sort of checklist of, these are the things you must be finding for. And I feel like, the findings of the board section and the OSRD section at least does that very clearly. So.
No, I agree. I think that's an excellent point.
Yeah, very good point.
You can do that. But I assume your preference is for us to first focus on the OSRD section until we get that request out to council.
I would think that's probably the priority, yes.
I would concur with that.
Thank you.
All right, anything else on the flexible or open?
Nope.
All right, I'll move on to the review of minutes. Is there, we have draft minutes from the September 21st meeting. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
So moved. Second.
Any comments or questions? Bob?
No, I read them. I didn't see anything that was of concern.
Okay, Mike?
No comments, no questions.
Kate?
I'm going to abstain.
Dylan?
It looked good to me.
Yep, I had no issues or comments or questions. So there's a motion to approve. All those in favor say aye. Bob?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Kate?
Abstain.
Dylan?
Aye.
I say aye.
So our new minutes taker will be very happy to know that her first set of draft minutes was approved as submitted. So,
Look at that.
You trained
Dana.
her well. You trained the person well.
oh,
We
no,
give her a
that's
gold
cool.
star. We really thank her. That was a good job.
That's great. Very nice. All right, anything else from the board or staff?
No, I
No.
think it's been nice to have an opportunity to talk about the bylaws a little bit tonight, as opposed to being just overwhelmed with business. We're oftentimes too busy to get to this stuff. So this was good stuff tonight. Thanks to everyone for their
Agreed.
opinions and feedback.
Agreed.
I just
Yeah.
want to state thank you to everybody for indulging my desires and having the conversation and to staff for helping us out. And I just want to give you all a heads up that I will probably propose something similar after the holidays, maybe in January, since I think we only have one meeting in January, that we have a special meeting, because we have to clear up release of executive session minutes. And we probably still have executive session minutes that have to be approved, even if they are not released. And so I would like to do some housekeeping and get us up to where we're supposed to be with respect to them. So in December, I will probably be making that proposal that we do set aside a special meeting. Probably it would have to be executive session just for that purpose.
All
To
right,
help us, just like tonight helped us out.
nice heads up for staff, a little bit of leeway there.
They
Thank
already
you.
pleaded with me not to do it now. Pleaded with
Thank you for that delay, Kate.
All right, good discussion. I mean, it's a big topic, so it was good discussion. So thank you tonight. Yeah, anything else from anybody, or a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second,
All right, all those in favor? Bob,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
Kate,
aye.
Dylan?
Aye.
I say aye. All right, thanks, guys.
Good night.
Thank you, everybody.
Night.
Have a
Have a
good
good
night.
night, everyone.
You too.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.